Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself and
Okay.
tell us kind of what is UX like.
Okay. Well, a little bit about myself. So I've been working in UX for 25 years or so. So I've seen uh, the field develop and grow and change. So
Oh
what
yeah.
we thought of as UX was different 20 years ago than it is now.
Hmm.
But basically, UX is just a collection of different tools and methods and kind of like lenses on a problem that you can use to ensure that your product and service, whatever it is that you're doing, will work for the people who you're designing for, and that would get you product market fit.
Okay, so it really does come down to that experience and product market fit, and yeah, giving some guidance, yeah, of how do you accomplish that. That's what you're. It's like a toolbox in a lot of ways. Is that?
Yeah. So a lot of people think about UX as what are the colors, what fonts do I put in here, how rounded should my buttons be, and that's part of it, but that's a small part. So let me share my screen real quick.
Sure.
Let's see right here. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so this is like a diagram of the levels of UX. So like any model, it's imperfect. So you can always, well, what about this? What about this? What other thing? Well, yeah, sure. We can have a discussion about that. But it's good to give this overview that UX incorporates all of these different things. So I'll go through this very quickly. You have a lot of people talk about UX, UI design. If you notice on this, UI is a very small part of what UX is. It's the surface. It's this visual design part. And as you go down, you get more and more abstract. So this model talks about the skeleton and lists all these different things: interface design, navigation design, information design. Then it goes down a level further to information architecture and interaction design. Then a little further into scope, functional and content requirements. And then at the bottom here, the base of everything is strategy, understanding user needs and business goals. And, this model is imperfect. I'm really big on the context of use of the environment in which the people using your product or service operate in. I focus more on these lower levels. Earlier in my career, I started with this part at the top, and I can still do it, but I'm much more engaged in this the full scope of what UX is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One question, even before we kind of dive into the different stages, a lot of times, just like we think about surface, a lot of times when people first hear UX, they're thinking more on the UI side. But also, even if you think you read out like, oh, skeleton, it's like, okay, it's interface, navigation, but even down to structure, it's like information architecture. It still kind of feels like there's always a screen involved. But I know that UX encompasses interactions and experiences that don't just involve a screen and a window. So is that like, can you speak to that a little bit? Like, so say someone is doing, maybe they're doing consulting, and so they don't have always a screen. They're doing a lot more person-to-person type of business, or maybe they deliver a service. How does UX, especially as you're talking about kind of that lower chunk, how does that apply to those forms of businesses where they're not making an app or something like that?
So the bottom three parts here are going to apply. They're not just digital. They apply to service and out in the real world. No matter what kind of a product that you're doing, you need to understand the strategy around it. You need to understand what are your requirements around that. Information architecture has to do with how you're organizing information around your business. So let's say if you're a coffee shop,
Okay.
there's a strong information architecture component to that. Like you have a menu, you have
Right.
the way you talk to your customers, and all that is things you need to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, skeleton in this model, this is very digital centric, but you could apply skeleton to service design.
Okay.
That instead of saying interface design, you could talk, well, what is your process for accomplishing what you want to accomplish? Navigation doesn't only apply to a computer screen. It's
Right.
you get around an environment. And information design applies to service as well.
No, that's great. No, that's a good way to name that. Service design is, all part of that UX universe there, and can be really helpful to a lot of type of businesses. We see people starting in this age where they're offering their smarts and they're selling their expertise in those different kind of business offerings. And so, well, let's jump in to talking through some of the different stages of business and how does UX apply in those. That sound good? For sure. All right, let's talk about adoption. So at the end of discovery, we graduate from discovery into adoption by proving out that it's like, okay, we have a sufficiently validated offer. We've had our ideal clients say, yes, I want to purchase this, enough times that we go, okay, we have an offer that resonates, that we can sell. It's ready to sell. And so that's we've graduated from discovery with an offer that's ready to sell because we know that because we've sold it. So then we move into adoption. We're trying to gain market adoption. We're trying to get traction. And the other end where we graduate from market adoption is when we've hit kind of this economic milestone that it's like, okay, we've sold enough in a month that if we can, then later in sustainability, if we can repeat that month after month, we have the business that's gonna sustain. And that's kind of what sustainability is it's taking that 1 month and then going, how do we repeat that 12 times over and over? But so the journey of adoption is going from I have an offer that's ready to sell to I'm selling at a threshold that if I can continue, then I have a sustainable business. And so it's gaining that market adoption to get from I know it's ready to sell to I've sold it enough. I just have to now figure out how to repeat without burning out or driving myself crazy. So in that market adoption stage, when it comes to UX ideas and principles, what are some of the questions that an entrepreneur should be asking there?
Okay, so I think it's around how might we optimize our service and product to encourage adoption and retain users.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Kind of looking at like, are people going to buy from us more times? Is that kind of like something like that?
Minimize churn. Yeah.
Minimize churn in there. Yeah. That makes sense. And that can also be, obviously, you're going to continue that question into sustainability as well. Well, and when we were talking about discovery, you mentioned messaging. I feel like that's going to be a big thing is like, how am I attracting? How am I engaging? How am I closing clients? You think about that sales process where they're going from awareness of like what, speaking to what is the problem that I have? They're becoming aware of their problem. They're considering, how do I solve that problem? They're engaging with the solutions that your business is offering, and then eventually they're buying it. It's that solution's getting sold to them. And so even you think about that, that's some of what's getting built out in that adoption stage. So when you think about that kind of customer journey, talk to me about like kind of some UX questions or skills that orbit in that space, maybe.
Okay, so it's at this point you need to have put in place ways to collect feedback from your customers.
Okay.
And this can be quantitative and qualitative feedback. And it should be built into your sales process.
Okay. Yeah.
It can, and you should have a customer journey map of how engaging with your product. And if you have that, you can collect quantitative information and qualitative information along the customer journey to see how accurate is this journey? Where are the problems in this journey? And when you, there's a lot that depends on what your product is, and technology provides some easier ways to collect quantitative data. Because you like if you have a digital product, you can build analytics into your product, and you can use that to monitor your marketing to say in sales funnel, and see where people are dropping out and where they are converting, and then you can see if you retain customers, and you can identify where the problem areas are. Then you can go out and do some qualitative research on the why. Why is that problem there? The analytics, the quantitative will answer the what's going on, but you need to go out and talk to people. So if you have a customer who leaves, you go talk to them. You could maybe you do a brief survey first, and you ask if we can follow up with you. And then you follow up with them and with a qualitative interview, just asking them what the similar questions you asked in the previous stages. What are the things that work for you for our product? What are the things that work? Why did you fire us? Why did you leave? Is there anything we can do to help? You can even build that into your retention strategies.
Oh yeah, that's good. So what I hear you saying, Andy, is it really at this stage, a lot of the UX work is going to revolve around feedback and keeping that feedback loop going. And it seems like there are times where the customer knows they're giving feedback, like maybe you're scheduling that follow-up interview, or you're sending them a survey, and they know like, oh, I'm rating you, or I'm answering a question. But there's other times that you're just collecting feedback kind of passively, in a sense of like, well, did they move to the next stage? Or maybe in those sales calls, you're recording them, and you're made me think about this when you're thinking about like recognizing stuff. It's like, hey, let's take that transcript and dump it into AI and go, what were the questions that came up at this? And you can kind of start to, that maybe be a qualitative where you can kind of process like what connects or something like that. Is that an example?
Yes. So the feedback that you are collecting, you need to make it actionable.
Okay.
So you can pull in the facilitator skill set and use the design thinking methods to, based on this feedback, we can do some clustering and identify these themes. And so let's say we have problem one. Then you can have a group of stakeholders meeting and ask do some guided brainstorming on this. How might we fix problem one? And then when you ideate on all those, you can cluster those and come into what these basic ideas are, and you can flesh them out into concepts. Now, at that point, you may need to. It's kind of like the same kind of process that you went through with designing your product. You want to do that with this fix or the ideas that come out of that. You need to concept them. You need to wireframe them. Do some kind of primitive prototype where you haven't put a lot of effort into visualizing this idea, and then you should test it with your customers and see if it works, if it works for them, and then take that information and then refine it and then build it into your product, and then do some validation to make sure that what you think the fix will do. Okay, so when you collect feedback from your customers, it may not just be around fixing problems. It may be around identifying how your product should shift, or things you should add to your product, and you need to keep open to that in this stage.
Yeah. And how do you hear that? Like, is it like by the questions that maybe customers ask during the sales process of like, oh, does it do this? And you have to continually say, no, that's not one of the features. And you're like, wow, we get that on like 60% of our calls. Maybe that is what people are really looking for. We need to frame our solution around that problem that they're asking about. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Sure, it could come from customer suggestions. It could also come from when you are evaluating the feedback from customers, and so that evaluation can include things they liked and things that worked well, and things that didn't work well, and customer ideas for other features. All that can be combined into it's kind of like when you have a product that's out there and figuring out how to improve it or modify it, it's this whole puzzle that has to fit together, and that's a whole nother skill, is shaping the concept to fit into everything else you have.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, all right, so at this stage, this adoption stage where we're working through market adoption, we've talked about some of the questions and some of the metrics. What UX expertise or resources should an entrepreneur, a founder, be aware of during this market adoption stage?
Okay, so at this point, you may want to consider having some full-time roles.
Okay.
And the kind of skills that you need on this team are, you do need that UX UI skills that are going to cover the surface level and go like maybe one level deep. You need to have the service design skills, who can look at the user journey, and beyond the user journey, kind of like look at things from the front end process, the front end interactions, the on stage, which is how the customer actually interacts with you, who at the related with the product or service they interact with, that's front of stage. And then what are some of the backstage? So people within the company that are working backstage to make sure that the product service works. And then what services and tools and resources that they need to access. I just kind of described service design.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, and that makes sense. And some of that may even fit better in sustainability, because remember, we're trying to, like, at the end of adoption, we're just trying to get that first month of like, all right, we have the revenue that we can run. So, but like you said, to get that point, you still got to sell a good amount. So it seems like maybe it's not full-time people on an in-house team, but it might be a kind of a good bench of contractors where you're like, okay, I need a full team. I need to be connected to people with all these skills, or I need to be connected maybe with, like you said earlier, a generalist who can do these at least to a satisfactory like level to get to that first point. And then maybe when we go, okay, how do we optimize that to make it sustainable? Okay, we're gonna improve all of those. But it does sound like even to get to that like first month, that first economic milestone, you're gonna need all of those expertise. So even if they're not full time, you need access. You need to know people who can fill each of those gaps, right? Is that kind of what it sounds like?
Yeah, and then just the other skill sets that you may want to include are product design, which is incorporates a lot of different things, information architecture, content strategy, and that user experience research skill.
Yeah, tell me, okay, let's double click real quick before we move on to the next stage about content strategy, because a lot of what happens in adoption is building that customer journey, which a lot of time in this day and age, there's a lot of content around that customer journey. So for someone who's not familiar with that idea of content strategy, what is that person bringing to your business in an adoption stage?
So there's crossover between information architecture, content strategy, and sometimes UX writer. They call this. So it's just someone who's focused on the actual text and language that's incorporated in your product. This could be materials that explain your product. This could be the labels on the navigation system. This can be the structure of the functionality of your product.
Okay.
This could be how type ahead in a search works.
Yeah. Or even could it be like let's say if you're not selling a digital product, a lot of that totally makes sense where all of those things would come out in an app or something with a lot of interfaces. But if I'm selling more of a service, some of that also comes to like, okay, what type of content needs to show up at kind of the front end of my social media, my outreach? What type of content shows up maybe in my like customer nurturing journey, and then on the like maybe like, hey, what goes on my website? If they're anywhere along that, maybe they have this question or this objection, how do I frame that well? Is that kind of what they're doing also in there?
Well, and it can also be involved in boilerplate templates that you use to communicate, and I'm just, maybe the deliverable for your business is some kind of a report. So how's the report structured, and what's the language you use in that report?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, that's super helpful. All right, well, let's kind of wrap up here and talk about like the overall, like, we've talked about each of these stages here, but if someone's just chiming in for one of these videos talking about an individual stage, give me just kind of like a recap as we've gone from existential all the way through saturation and then kind of an event. Just give me kind of a recap view of the role of UX as a business grows and matures.
So the role of UX across all these different stages is really very similar. This has to do with how formalized and if it's fractional or full-time permanent roles who are doing it. And just what goes across all of the stages are things like doing user research to find out about your customers and the environment in which they work, and then documenting that in an actionable way.
Okay.
And then I described that and then visualizing things based on that, visualizing your service or your product, and then kind of refining that in the later stages as wireframes, as comps, as prototypes, and then continually iteratively testing and validating that you're on the right track, or that you're identifying where you need to shift as your customers or market shift.
Yeah, that makes sense. So no, I appreciate you walking through each of these stages. This has been really helpful, and I encourage anyone watching these videos, if you're catching just one of the stages, maybe watch the two adjacent stages, the one before and the one after that you're currently in, if you haven't watched those already, because it's really helpful to get kind of a picture as you've really fleshed that out. So
well, and I would add, after watching these, if you have any questions, reach out, and I'd love to meet and chat, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Andy, you've been a great resource, and I'm excited to see how you continue to help this community of founders grow their businesses.